Welcome to today's Software AG webcast titled ARIS 10 Scenario Planning, Choose the Right Business Setting. Today's program will be presented by Thaler from ARIS Product Management at Software AG. As we move through today's presentation, I invite you to submit any questions that you may have via the Q&A box, which is located in the lower right corner of your WebEx session. We will address your questions at the end of today's program. In the event that we are not able to answer your question, your submission will be recorded and we will be back in touch with you as soon as possible. Additionally, today's presentation is being recorded. Should you wish to receive a copy of this webcast, please send an email to the webcast host. Before I turn today's presentation over to Tom, I would like to briefly introduce you to Software AG. Software AG helps companies with their digital transformation. With the Software AG's digital business platform, companies can better interact with their customers and bring them on new digital journeys, promote unique value propositions, and create new business opportunities. In the Internet of Things market, Software AG enables enterprises to integrate, connect, and manage IoT components, as well as analyze data and predict future events based on artificial intelligence. The digital business platform is built on decades of uncompromising software development, IT experience, and technological leadership. It is now my pleasure to welcome Tom Thaler.
Yeah, hello everyone, and thank you, Christina, for that introduction. So, welcome to our webcast today on scenario planning, choose the right business setting. My name is Tom Thaler. I'm product manager for ARIS at Software AG, and I'm personally responsible for the design clients in ARIS, so the ARIS architect and designer, also the connect designer. I'm also responsible for all the visual analytics capabilities, the dashboarding capabilities with our newest member in the ARIS family called ARIS Aware, and I'm also responsible for the topic scenario planning, or let's call it simulation for those of you who are already familiar with that topic. I'm very happy to give that webinar today about that topic. I want to start with a very brief overview on the agenda. So what can you expect from today? First of all, I will start with a general introduction. So I will let some words on what we are actually talking about, what scenario planning is, why scenario planning is important, and what the typical questions that are related to that topics are. I will then come to an overview on scenario planning with ARIS from a tooling perspective. So we want to have a look how we can plan different scenarios for an end-to-end process or an end-to-end scenario in a business. And this will be followed by a live demonstration around a car rental company, a car rental process, where I want to give you an impression how that actually looks like directly in the tool. I will then let some words on some possible next steps. So I think it is also necessary to know what should be done after I plan my scenario. So what is the next logical step? What should I do, and why should I do that? And I think in the end we will also have about 15 minutes for a Q&A session. Okay, so with that, what we are talking about. Scenario planning or scenarios are quite essential for different purposes. So I think one of the most important things is in general decision making. So I think everybody of you might be faced with some strategic business alternatives, and it's quite important to make reliable decisions based on reliable data, and I think therefore a scenario is a very good instrument. But also if you want to develop some strategies in order to be able to manage some unexpected behavior in your daily business, some unexpected events maybe as well, I think therefore scenarios are really essential. So what we are talking about today is basically the process of identifying the different scenarios that might be relevant for my business, and also analyzing that different future alternative scenarios. So what does it mean for my company, and how can I handle it? So that is basically what we see under the term identification here. Then I think it is also essential to know that different scenarios always rely on a variety on assumptions. Yeah. So there are different things, different aspects that need to be considered in order to define what a scenario is. So that might range from some specific resources that are allocated to my processes, on the actual way how my processes are executed. And it's important to first of all describe that differences and also to consider that for maybe a prediction phase. Yeah? So prediction is something like the output of a simulation of a specific scenario. Yeah? So what we want to do here is to predict the effects of different scenarios. I want to know what does the different scenarios mean for my business, for my operational business, and also for my business outcomes. So that is exactly what I need to know to be able to decide on specific scenarios and to prepare my business for the effects of the different scenarios. So that is also the reason why I should do that. So basically what you want to do is with scenario planning is to help some managers, some people that have to decide to be prepared for the different business settings or for the different scenarios. So what are typical questions we are faced with when we are talking about scenario planning? So I think a very classical question is related to execution times, waiting times. So this is something that mostly comes from the customer side. Yeah, so the customer said, okay, I have to wait a very long time to do this or to do that. And therefore, I think one very classical question is how can we reduce wait times to increase our customer experience? Yeah. So I think this is not only limited to the customer perspective, but also to the internal perspective. So also there you have the situation that maybe some process steps needs to be or need to wait for other things to be executed first. A second very interesting perspective is related to HR, the human resources. So what we see again and again at our customers, at the companies, that the HR utilization is often misbalanced. Yeah? So there are some organizational units or roles that are absolutely overloaded. They have a lot to do while others are underloaded. And I think both is not very satisfying for employees. And therefore, I think a second very interesting question is how can we balance that HR utilization? What can we do to increase our employee satisfaction with the corresponding side effects you could have to, I don't know, the wait times, for example, and also to the customer satisfaction. A very, more or less new topic is robotic process automation, where we are faced with different questions since a few months. So it might be interesting to know what could be a very good starting point for RPA initiatives here. So do I have any specific process steps that makes more sense to execute them in an automated way with robotic process automation than it is for the other activities? And therefore, I think that can be a very good trigger or a very good decision point where I can say, okay, do this first because it has the most important, the most probable benefit for that. So how do we do that in ARIS, or what does scenario planning means from a tooling perspective? So generally, what we need to do first is to design and plan some end-to-end scenarios. And I think exactly that end-to-end is the first aspect I want to focus on here. So we are talking about different process models. Process models as assets you are typically working with. So very simple example here, just order handling. So an order is being created, it needs to be shipped, it needs to be invoiced, the payment needs to be checked. So there are different tasks or activities which have further sub-activities maybe, and therefore you have a range of processes that are connected to each other. So this is really an end-to-end perspective, what needs to be done to fulfill a specific case or a specific process, only from the processing perspective. But nevertheless, it is not only the activities that are executed in such a scenario, but we are also talking about the involved human resources. Yeah, so you have different roles, different organizational units that are involved in the execution of that process, and that of course needs to be considered as well. And there are also a variety of other aspects. So for example, technical and capacity resources, so like for example the supporting IT systems, some warehouse equipment, or especially also some risks that are connected to the different processes, to the different process steps. And all in all, this is what we understand as a comprehensive end-to-end design of a specific process. So what is now important to not only focus on one exact status that is designed, but also to think about different scenarios, different settings, maybe different HR resources that are assigned to that, maybe different functions or the order of functions that are executed, and therefore it is necessary to define different assumptions to a scenario. What does that mean? So I think there are two different perspectives on that. So the first is, with regards to a scenario, a variation of the process design itself. So this means actually the concrete activities that are executed during a process, maybe also the order of that activities, but of course also the resources that are allocated to that, maybe also the corresponding costs that result from that allocated resources. So this is somehow the internal perspective which I am as a company am able to control directly. But there's also another perspective, namely a variation of the expectations. Yeah? So the expectations, how the process will behave in reality. So I think here we are especially talking about some frequencies. Yeah, so for example, how often is a process being executed, or also how often will specific passes in my processes occur? What about the probabilities of risks, for example? How long will the different activities take? What is the volume of some orders or something like that? So that is something that is coming from outside the company. I'm not able to directly control that, but this is a very important aspect when thinking about scenarios, of course. So I think the good thing is that both types of variations can completely individually be defined in ARIS, in your ARIS repository with the corresponding design clients. The basis for that is basically always the business processes, which are expressed as an event-driven process trained in EPC, a BPMN diagram, or also the enterprise BPMN diagram, so an extended version of the BPMN world. So this is completely possible. How that works, I will show that in a few minutes in that live demo. End-to-end process simulation or predicting the effect. I think what is also clear for most of you actually is that you have the possibility with ARIS to describe your business processes from two different perspectives. Yeah, so the traditional perspective, the internal world. Yeah, so there is a typical perspective in case of business process management, but you are now also able to describe the customer perspective. Yeah, so this is expressed typically with customer journeys. So I can see the different customer touch points along my internal processes. So this is somehow the external perspective. I think it makes absolutely sense to combine both, yeah, because it is quite clear that the performance efficiency of my internal world directly affects the customer perspective as well, and I think that is something we should consider together. What is also very important that, as mentioned before, you can connect the dots, you can connect the different sub-processes in order to simulate or plan scenarios across process interfaces, across different processes. You want to analyze how the different processes work together in order to search or analyze some bottlenecks in that overall process chain. I think that is really essential for that. How can we predict some KPIs? So this is basically done with our underlying simulation or prediction engine. So there are some key performance indicators that are available out of the box, and they are always executed and calculated. So, for example, the throughput times for the different activities and processes. We have a look at the wait times. I can let some words about that also in the live demo in a few minutes. We can talk about the volumes and frequencies of different passes, of the occurrence of risks, for example, as well as also on the resulting costs for HR or for arbitrary other resources as well. So all of that is calculated always when you do a scenario planning with ARIS, and you can access that directly on the result view. So what is a very important thing also when you think about different scenarios is that, of course, you need to be able to analyze the different KPIs I just mentioned directly related to a specific scenario. But especially if you plan different scenarios, you need to be able to compare different ones, to compare different situations, maybe also in order to identify some benchmarks. So this is, I think, really essential to really focus on the delta in order to be able to identify the best working setting for my organization. So really focus on the delta. You can see an easy sample here on the screen. So on the left-hand side, some KPIs that are related to a first scenario, some KPIs related to a second scenario on the right-hand side, and an explication of the delta that is very important between the first and the second scenario. You can see a dashboard here. So the dashboard can be completely individually designed. You have individual KPIs you can arrange and visualize that in a way you are familiar with and you prefer. You can also choose completely different KPIs. You can access external data, for example, as well. So this is really completely flexible, and I think which is a very good benefit is that such scenario comparison dashboards can be seamlessly integrated in the process context, so you can see this information directly in the context of your originally planned process model with the different scenarios. Okay, so I want to show you how that works in an example, in a live demo, where I want to talk about a car rental process. So first of all, some background information on the use case. So basically, we do a car rental process. We have many customers which say, okay, we are complaining about long wait times at the service station. We are complaining about the availability of different cars. And in order to discover why this is happening, we, the UMG team, the United Motor Group, that is the name of our demo company, did an assessment where we, for example, measured the time with a stopwatch directly at the service points. We measured the utilization rates via our calendar systems, and we also did some personal assessments related to that. We analyzed the cost via controlling. We investigated the car rental pool sizes overall, but also at the different car rental stations. So what I want to say, we collected a lot of data directly from the, let's call it customer touch points as well, and the data that were retrieved from this initiative were then embedded and visualized in the process models, in specific attributes, and also in the customer perspective. So what I want to show first is exactly that customer perspective. And for that, I look at my customer journey map, which is called Book and Write. I have here the diagram, and this customer journey map, Book and Write, as mentioned before, represent exactly that external view on my business model. I can see what happens around my car rental processes, and here the customer experience management team documented the external view and connected the supporting internal processes. So what you can see here In the top lane is the different customer touch points. Yeah, so all the different points where a customer is in contact, has a correspondence with us as a company, and you can see, for example, here below our internal processes where you can directly jump into the details. So it is also possible here to define some incoming and outgoing data objects, some KPIs and channels. So also the customer experience management team got information by customers about their satisfaction with the offer and documented that as well. You can see that, for example, here that we have obviously a complaint wait time for the car. So that is exactly what we want to focus here. So as customers complain about that long wait times for the booked car, I think basically the company should optimize the connected process here. If I have a look at that, this would be in that case the car handover at rental station. So as mentioned, we proceeded an initiative, and after some internal investigations here, we came to the conclusion that the problem is part of the car maintenance cycle, and therefore I want to first of all jump here into that prepare booked car. So that is a previous step in order to give you an impression on how that looks like from a sub process or from a detailed perspective. So you can see here, for example, that it is possible via different ways to book a car. So, for example, via mobile app or via the hotline. Maybe there are other channels as well. You can see that you're able to select a select a car, to select some filtering options. So, I think, as you can see, there is a lot of things that are executed in the background by us internally. So I only want to focus on one specific aspect here. So this is this one service booked car. Here it is decided, or the car is being checked, and we can see that I have here in 10% of all cases that a defect on the car was found. So the problem seems here to be obviously that I have to request a car service, so something needs to be done with the car. I don't actually know what this is, but something needs to be done. That happens in 10% of the cases. I think that is already a very important aspect. So I want now shortly to go back, and what I'm now, of course, interested in is the internal perspective. And for that, I can directly jump into that internal perspective, which is the car rental model. And this is something we call a value-added chain diagram. So that is a higher level description on how my process works from end to end. So I have here the request of a booked car. It is being prepared. That is a process we just had a look at. There's a car handover. The car is being returned at any point of time, and they have different positions where it comes to a service of a defect car. And it closes with invoicing. Okay. What I want to do now is to first of all have a look at the current simulation results. As you can see now, I have a side-by-side view of different simulation KPIs or predicted KPIs, the wait times per function, maybe also the HR cost distribution, some human resource utilization. So there are only some examples of data that come as a result of the simulation I just proceeded. What I can see here, the red ones, are the activities that pass a specific threshold regarding the wait times per function. So wait times is the time I have to wait before a function can be executed because of a lack of resources, for example. So and if I have a look on that, so I have here nearly 240,000 hours of wait times for check car conditioning. That is part of the car rental return. I have very long wait times for the check if a car is still usable or not, at different car servicing processes. So as I can see, it always has to do with scheduling or doing some service, and I know now from my business background that everything that is mentioned here is basically executed by a specific role, which is a service dispatcher who is responsible for all that servicing activities. Yeah. So if I have a look at the chart below, so the human resource utilization, I can see exactly that role service dispatcher I just mentioned has a utilization of 111%. So he's absolutely overloaded. He is working too much, definitely. And at the same time, I can see that, for example, here the advanced service team member who is executing some other organizational activities, as well as a service team member, are quite underloaded. Yeah, so I think here's always something I can work a little bit with and try out how I can improve that waiting times, the process behavior in general, by aligning that a little bit. So what I would do first now is to decrease the human resources for the advanced service team member, for example, and of course also increase the number of service dispatcher, which can be a human resource switch, for example. So how does that work? For that, I want to jump into my architect environment. And as mentioned before, I first of all want to search for the role service dispatcher. Service dispatcher. This is a role, as mentioned before, and here I directly find that role, the service dispatcher, and the information regarding the attached human resources are maintained here in that attributes. Yeah. So this is this window, and I can see currently the service dispatcher has only one employee. So I think that is quite clear that he is overloaded in that case, and I would say let's just increase that, for example, to 3. Yeah, I just close that. Yes, I want to save the changes. And the second human resource we wanted to adapt here is the advanced service team member. That is this role. I do that in exactly the same way. So I go to the simulation, and here I see number of employees. Okay, this is already 1, so we definitely need that role. I currently have no possibilities to further decrease that number. But what I could do, I could have a look at the schedule for this employee, and therefore I navigate here via the Explorer tree into my advanced service team member schedule. So this is the working plan for this role, and I have here the possibility to define some date and time of his office or work hours. And I can see currently this is a full-time job. So what we could do that we say, okay, let's just make a part-time job out of that, and the other time he can work in another role in that case. So I say, okay, I save it, and what I need to do now is to make a new simulation, so to plan the scenario somehow. So what I do for that, I just select the different processes that are relevant for my end-to-end scenario. So that is exactly everything that is available here, my car rental group and all the processes I have here. I just make a right click and say evaluate and start the simulation. So what happens now is that the simulation model is loaded, so all the different process interfaces are solved, and everything is connected to each other. I have now also the possibility to make some configurations here. So for example, to say when or on which time frame should the simulation occur, I just choose here a half year. I can also say it doesn't matter when it is being executed, but it's also only important for me that it's 100 days or so. Yeah, and I can also set up a warm-up phase, which is also very important, since typically you don't start at 0. So especially here in the car rental case, there are always some cars that are already in use, and therefore I say I want to have some warm-up phase of 10 days here. I think that is a very good starting point. So what I do now, I can select here the different models that are included, and I just start the simulation with that start button. And what you can now also very easily see is that the different objects here are flickering. Yeah? So that means that what is currently flickering is currently executed. Yeah? So this is somehow an animation of that simulation. You can also see on the right-hand side what is happening, which events are put through, which functions are executed. So I have different possibilities here. I can also just pause the simulation in order to have a look on the intermediate results for that. I can restart that. So there are a lot of possibilities to work with that. So this takes a while because this is a very large scenario with a lot of models, a lot of content, a long time frame, and therefore I pre-calculated this here. So this is exactly the result after a simulation of a half year of my car rental business. So I can easily see I have here about 2,200 activations or process instances, so 2,200 car rental processes, in fact. I think the interesting thing is now that I have here many different statistical results of that simulation, which I'm able to analyze directly as a ad hoc mechanism, let's call it that way. So for example, with regards to the human resources, so we just adapted the number of employees for the service dispatcher role, yeah, and I can now directly see here the degree of utilization decreased to 50%. I also have obviously a side effect on the service team member. He has now a utilization of 39%. I think the reason for that is simply that service team here has a better utilization because they depend on the results of the service dispatcher team. Yeah, so I think that is a quite clear result. Also, the advanced service team member, which we just adapted, has now a utilization of 10%. So it is better, but basically not very good at all. What we can do as well, for example, if we go to the human resource cost, so I have some easy visualization capabilities. So I, for example, select the different cells here in that statistical results, and for example here just say, okay, generate me a pie chart, and I can now see the human resource cost distribution for that service team at the rental station. So I can now easily see, okay, I have a busy time cost of 85% and about 15% for the idle time cost. So this is a very easy mechanism to analyze that ad hoc. I can do that for all other results as well. So for example, for the wait times, I just select the complete column here, and I say generate, for example, a column chart, and here I get promptly a visualization of the distribution of the different wait times for the different functions. However, I think especially here we can easily see that such an analysis only makes sense if I can compare that to different scenarios. Yeah? And therefore, I want now to jump back into my car rental process. And the first thing I want to show here is the actual simulation results. Yeah? So this is another visualization of what I just generated with a simulation, but I also have the possibility, if I click here on the dashboards, to make a direct comparison with scenario planning of that two different scenarios I just mentioned. And this is something you already saw in a very similar way on the slides before. So to explain that only with a few words, on the left-hand side, I have all the different simulation results that are relevant for me as a business in my case. On the right-hand side, I have the results for the second scenario, and in the middle, I have the concrete differences, the delta. Yeah, so what I can see now very easily is that I was able to significantly reduce the dynamic wait time by 97%. I think you can also very easily see that here with that ranges for the wait time axis. So in the right case, so in the just optimized case, we are talking here about 6,000 hours, and here we have a range up to more than 200,000 hours. So I think that is very impressive already in that simple case. So the interesting thing here, I think, is that you have exactly the same order of activities on the left and on the right side, and the green bars mean that the dynamic wait time reduced, yeah, and the red ones mean that the dynamic wait time increased. So I think it is very easy to see that we have a lot of green ones here, and also the red ones does not seem to be so critical in comparison to each other. So this gives me a very good visual feedback on what happened or what the effect is directly of my simulation. Also with regards to the human resource utilization, yeah, so this is my starting situation. I can now see here as a delta that I changed the employees, so I have +2 or basically +1.5 employees since I increased the service dispatcher and I reduced the work time of a advanced service team member. So it looks better now. It looks not good. I think this is also very clear here. So nevertheless, I have a much healthier value for the service dispatcher, now utilization of 50%. The service team member increased, the advanced service team members increased. So I think that is basically a good result, but there's still a lot of potential to go further with that and to optimize that again and again. I think there are also some other important KPIs that might be relevant, but I think that is also a first and a quick, very good result with some easy activities we just proceeded here on the tool. Okay, so what should happen next? So basically, before I answer that, I think we should recap what we already did. So we generated the process design at all. Yeah, so we designed how our process should behave, what the different steps are. I have a lot of details. I collected some information from the concrete touch points. And I did a first round of the scenario planning, so something like a first improvement phase before the implementation. So the next step, of course, should be that I select one of different scenarios I want to implement based on the risk I have, based on the experience I have, and based on the scenario planning results I have. So I want to implement that. This is typically not a case of ARIS, but what is a case of ARIS is to monitor and analyze the actual behavior. So this is a very important aspect, because I have to check whether what I planned in my scenario also occurs in that way in reality, or whether there are significant differences which I should handle somehow. Yeah, so therefore it is definitely necessary to monitor and analyze that behavior and to use that new insights I have here in order to continuously improve my business processes at all, or also to identify new scenarios I did not think about in the past. I think the keyword for that is process mining. For process mining, we have 3 different use cases I only shortly want to introduce. So the first is process discovery. In the process discovery, you have the chance to derive the actual process behavior and to visualize that as so-called function flows. Yeah, so that is quite similar to the process models that are available and visualized in ARIS. So this really covers the actual behavior in your organization. Then you have the possibility to check the conformance. Yeah? So you want to know whether the processes in reality behave like they were all originally planned. And finally, you also want to enhance your currently existing processes with the knowledge you got from the actual execution, and that is exactly what you need to do to continuously improve your business processes. I want to let some words especially on the process conformance. So here, what you have on the left-hand side is a to-be process design. So that is what we designed at the beginning. You have your intention of the process model, and you describe that in your ARIS repository. And on the other hand side, you have your as-is process execution you are analyzing and monitoring. The interesting thing is now that you have the possibility to exchange different information. Yeah? So you can use the to-be process design in order to check the conformance. Yes? So for example, from an ordering perspective. Yeah? So are all the different activities executed? Are all the different passes executed? What are the differences, of course, as well? And is there a demand to adapt the differences? Because there's very often the situation that the differences that occur in reality have very good reasons, and therefore I think that is a very good point where I have the possibility to look on what happens in reality and whether it makes sense to adapt my process design, of course, as well. So if you want to learn more about that aspect of process mining, I want to recommend you one of our latest webinars, Integrated Process Mining with ARIS. So you have the link here on the screen. Just make a screenshot, or we will also share that afterwards. I think here we have the possibility to give you some further guidance on that. Okay, the last thing I want to mention is related to enterprise digital twin. So that is a term that is also mentioned by Gartner in the latest release, and that is basically exactly what you just saw. Yeah, so you design how your business operates, you make some preliminary improvements based on scenario planning, you implement that, you monitor that, you analyze that, you continuously improve. So really, this is a digital twin of your enterprise, and therefore we also have a lot of information currently available on our website. So just visit twin.softwareag.com in order to get some additional material as well as the Gartner report for that. Okay, and with that, I'm at the end of the current presentation of the current webinar, and I think we now also have about 10 or 15 minutes for a Q&A session.
Yes, so feel free to submit your questions via the Q&A section. And we also have a first question. This is for you, Tom. Where do the presented data in the dashboard come from? What mechanism is used?
So I think the question is related to this dashboard here. So this is a very good question. This data comes directly from the ARIS repository, so there's no step in between. We use here the concept of ARIS queries. So the ARIS query states a visual way of analyzing the ARIS repository. So with that, you have the possibility to define some queries graphically. So you can say, okay, take a process model, for example, and give me all included activities, all included roles, and give me all the information that are a result of the simulation related to that. And then you can directly use that as an input for a visualization in that dashboard. So that is very easy to use, and you can access basically the complete ARIS repository with that query mechanism. Yeah.
And the next question is, are there possibilities to automatically find the best setting for a scenario? How can the parameter be varied?
Okay. So also very good question. So what I actually presented in the live demo is only the possibility to define different scenarios and to focus on one specific scenario. So what you could do as well with the simulation and engine is that I just want to show that with a specific example how that could look like. So I can also say when I right-click here on such a process model, not only start simulation, but also start simulation experiment. And with that, so it would take a while now to go through that in a detail. That would be too much for now. But here you have the possibility to define a factor of variation. Yeah? So you can, for example, say, okay, my possibility would be to set all the different included human resources from 1 to 10 employees, for example, and then the system automatically looks for local maximum. So you can also use different factors for that. So there are a lot of things you can do here. And what happens then is that the simulation, once through the permutation of the different variations, and it automatically identifies the best setting for you. So that would be an alternative way that is a bit more complex. It has also something to do with the details in the ARIS repository, maybe also some statistics, but that is a very strong instrument and is possible with ARIS as well. Yep. Further questions?
There's another question coming in. Can I present other KPIs in the comparison dashboard?
Yes, so this is absolutely possible. So this is an ARIS Aware dashboard. So ARIS Aware, as mentioned before, is the dashboarding solution of ARIS Connect. And here you have a completely flexible dashboard editor where you are able to choose your own visualization, to choose your own data. So what I choose here for that demonstration is just a very limited overview of the different results of the simulation, which only should show that you can directly access that, and basically you have the possibility to calculate the KPIs you're interested in a completely flexible way, and also to arrange the different charts in a completely flexible way. So this is definitely possible.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions? So I would like to take this opportunity to invite everyone on today's webcast to register for the additional programs we have scheduled in this current ARIS webcast series. All upcoming programs can be found under the Events tab of the company section at softwareag.com. So Tom, thank you very much for your time and presentation today. With that, our program has ended. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much. Bye.